This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good. So today's topic is Lag BaOmer, and it's a bit strange. Like we discussed last time, a couple of weeks ago when we did the Omer, how the Omer is the counting and getting us ready for Shavuot. So it's meant to be this very exciting build-up time. We had our physical exodus from Egypt, that was Pesach, Passover, and now we're working our way towards that spiritual exodus, which is Shavuot. So, yet this is intermingled with a certain degree of avelut, of mourning, of sadness. And that's why there are no weddings, and that is why also we, as a mourner, doesn't shave or get haircuts. We too don't shave or get haircuts. So we're mixing in this element of mourning. And then comes Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, and all heck breaks loose. And it's very strange. So let's understand why this is, or try to get a better understanding in why we're mixing in this element of mourning, and why, and we'll see, because once we see why we're mourning and we see why Lag BaOmer is different, it doesn't seem to be a cause of celebration. It rather seems to be a cause of letting out a sigh of relief, but not celebration. So let us begin. We'll start with source number 1, which is the Gemara in Yevamot, which tells the story of Rabbi Akiva and his students, and why we have this aspect of mourning during this time. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Lamad Torah v'yalduto. If you learn Torah when you were young, don't say, okay, now it's time to retire. Yilmod Torah b'zaknuto. You have to learn Torah even in your older age. Haylo talmidim. If you had talmidim, if you had students, b'yalduto, when you were young, yilo talmidim ziknuto. You need to work on having talmidim, students, disciples also in your later years. Shenemar, as it says, baboker zira et zarecha. In the morning, plant your seeds, vigomer, etc. And the evening, do not let your hand rest. Now, this is Rabbi Akiva's teaching, because, well, I should say because, but this was a life experience aspect of Rabbi Akiva. Amru, it was stated, Shneim Asar Elef Zugim Talmidim Hayulo Rabbi Akiva. He had 12,000 pairs of students. We see from here the importance of a chavruta. A chavruta is your study partner, right? As opposed to trying to study alone, you study with someone else and you each sharpen one another, right? When you're on your own, you can get a little bit lazy and not work it out so clearly. Very often, when I'm preparing my class for my morning almost daf, almost yomi class, so I learn it, I prepare it, but it only gets that much clearer. Hello, so good to see you. It only gets that much clearer once I'm teaching it, because then they ask me questions, and furthermore, in order to share it with others, you have to have it that much more clear. So we're in source number 1, and we're in the middle there. So he had 12,000 pairs of Talmidim, 24,000 Talmidim. Migavat ad Antifras, that's where they were spread out. V'kulan metu b'perek echad. And they all died. Tragically, they all died within a certain period of time. Mipnei, why? Shelo nagu kavod zeh lazeh. Because they did not show one another the kavod, the honor that they should have been showing to one another. Now, it's fascinating. Rabbi Akiva's maxim was v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Ze klal gadol b'Torah. Love your fellow like yourself. That's the klal gadol in the Torah. So is that something that he didn't manage to give over to his students properly? Is that something that with a Rebbe like Rabbi Akiva, with a sterling example like Rabbi Akiva, then the students had to be on the highest level of that? And if they fall short even a small amount, that will be considered serious. We'll soon see why we make such an issue out of that. Or is it something that Rabbi Akiva, after experiencing this loss due to their not showing the proper kavod, that's when he realized it's got to be all about that? I don't know. These are all, at least in my mind, possibilities. But according to their level, they were not nohei kavod. They were not showing honor one to another. V'haya olam shamem. And the world was in a spiritually desolate state. Until he came to those who became our rabbis of the south. Vishonalem, and he started to teach them. Who was that? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. So these are, as we learn through Gemaras, the Talmud, these are of the most prominent names of our oral teachings. The Haim Hamidu Torah Otasha, and it was they who reestablished the Torah, who Hamidu stood the Torah back up during that time period. Tana, it was taught. Kula Metu, when did they die? Mi Pesach v'Atzeret. They died during this time period that we are in now, between Pesach and Atzeret, which is Shavuot. Arechar bar Abba, and others say Rechia bar Abin, Kulam Metu Mito Ra'ah. And it was a very, very difficult death that they each endured. What was that? Rav Nachman Asachra, death by choking. So we have this time period of this excited anticipation building up to Shavuot. At the same time, we have this tragic event that took place during this time period. And therefore, we have these aspects of Avelut, of mourning, that continue on. Let's see source number 2 from Breshit Rabbah, the Medrash. Rabbi Akiva told his new students, Banai, my sons, Harishonim lo meitu ela shaita eineim tsara elu leelu. My earliest students died because they did not look, they had a tsar ayin, they did not look generously to one another. Tenu datchem, right? Put your minds to it. Shelo ta'asu kema'asehem. Right? Recognize, right? Don't go down that road. Don't follow in the way that they did it. So we have this. We'll come to that afterwards, right? Another question that can be asked. We have 3 weeks during this summer where we mourn the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And here we have, that's 21 days. And here we have 33 days or 32 days of mourning the students of Rabbi Akiva. It seems to be, there you go, Ken. It seems to be a very, very strange apportionment of our mourning times. We'll come back to it a little bit later. Rav Aaron Kotler, who was the legendary founder of the Lakewood Yeshiva. He founded Lakewood Yeshiva soon after World War II. And at that time, there was not all that much full Torah dedication in the Golden Medina, as the United States was called, in the Golden Country, where the gold was in the streets. And he worked tirelessly to set up a yeshiva that would be like the yeshivot that were there back in Europe, which had become destroyed. The only one yeshiva to survive intact through World War II and Nazi Germany, Nazi Europe, was the Mir Yeshiva. The Mir Yeshiva they traveled together. There was a Japanese envoy by the name of Sugihara, who, with tremendous Mesirat Nefesh, he issued all of these travel permits one after another to the Dutch island, where it was crazy. The Trans-Siberian Railroad got them to the port. They're from there, then to Japan, and then from Japan they made their way to Shanghai, China, where there was this massive shul that had been built by a Sephardic Gevir, a Sephardic philanthropist, and that was not really being used all that much. Not that many Jews were there. And the story, as I heard it, when the yeshiva got there and they all sat down, there was the right amount of seats for them. But that was the one yeshiva that survived intact, made its way then. There's a Mir in Brooklyn and a Mir in Yerushalayim. But the Lakewood Yeshiva was founded in order to reenact what they had in Europe. And today you've got thousands of students who are learning in what's called BMG, Beit Medrash Gavoa, which is the name of the Lakewood Yeshiva. So he writes as follows in source number 3. I'm sorry, I didn't move this down. There we go. He writes in Hebrew, to explain why Rabbi Akiva students died for a seemingly trivial sin, perhaps we can say that Rabbi Akiva was the foundation of the redaction of the oral law. His students were the ones who would pass on the oral law to future generations. Therefore, they had to embody the perfection of all the 48 traits through which Torah is acquired. Right? Rabbi Noach Weinberg made this very popular through his 48 ways of wisdom, but it's based on the Mishnah that there are 48 traits necessary in order for which the Torah can be acquired. If they would lack even one of these traits, they would be lacking in the essence of the acquisition of the Torah and would not be able to transmit it in purity and holiness. Therefore, apart from the fact that God is strict with the righteous to within a hair's breadth, there was also this concept, this idea, that since they were lacking in the quality, one of those 48, which is being close with one's fellow students, which is, you turn the page, one of the 48 traits, the Torah would be fundamentally flawed. Therefore, they were not worthy of passing on the oral law to future generations. Furthermore, their Torah learning was deficient because it was not completely pure, and the oral law had to be passed on as a complete Torah in every way. Therefore, they did not merit having the Torah passed on through them. It was instead the rabbis of the South who merited this. And that's why Rabbi Akiva told them, listen, you are going to be the pipeline of Torah going forward. Do not repeat their errors. Since the life of the sages is Torah, as Rambam writes, Maimonides writes, they were lacking in the essence of their existence, and that allowed for what happened. And it's interesting, we use the term tsar ayin. You know, when you're in yeshiva, and I had the great fortune of spending years in yeshiva, so you have your chavruta, your study partner, and you fight it out. What does this mean? What does that mean? What's the understanding behind it? And you know, you walk into a Beit Midrash. It's not a library, right? It's raucous in there. It's not quiet. It is raucous in there with people arguing and talking up and back. And sometimes, you know, when you're wrong, it can be hard, right? Because, you know, the value there is on the understanding, on the intellectualism, and on the trying to find what we call the emet, the truth. And I used to tell my chavrusas, if we're arguing and I start to really raise my voice, that's a good sign that I realize I'm wrong. So do me a favor, come in for the kill, put me out of my misery as quickly as you can, and then we can move on. right? But there, it's easy to lapse into this sar ayin, right? Oh, he got the answer. I wanted to get the answer. And when we speak about the angels in the morning davening, we say kulam ahuvim. They're all beloved. And that's the idea that they don't have. They all want to give honor to God's name, and they're not forgetting anyone else. Why did you get to do it instead of me? It's meant to be this symphony. And this passing on of the Torah Shebaal Peh needed to have that aspect amongst the Talmidim. And that is where they were lacking. Now, it was on the 33rd day of the Omer that they stopped dying, that the deaths came to an end. Okay? It was 15 days before Shavuot Lag BaOmer. Okay. Now, it's hard to understand. Okay, so they stopped dying. That's hardly a cause for celebration. Like I said, that's a cause to let out a sigh of relief, right? And furthermore, there were none left. He had these 24,000 Talmidim, right? Why did they stop dying? Because they all died, right? So the whole celebratory aspect of Lag BaOmer, right, seems to be a little bit strange. So let's take a look at source number 4. Rabbi Akiva was the greatest sage of his generation. It is said that he was the shoresh, the root, the source of Torah Shebaal Peh that came through him. The line of transmission of the Torah from Sinai to future generations ran through him and his students. When his 24,000 students were decimated, it caused a major depression. How would the chain continue? Who would provide the light of Torah to future generations? How could they ever be replaced? How could a grieving people on the run from Roman persecution be consoled for the loss of so many great men, so crucial to the spiritual survival of the nation? The urge to say it's all over must have been overwhelming. The less faithful and more pessimistic among them must have been ready to give it all up. But Rabbi Akiva recovered from his devastating loss to transmit the Torah through a new group of 5 students. It was on Lag BaOmer that Rabbi Akiva began teaching to these new Talmidim. It's when he started to teach again. The seeds he planted that day, which ultimately produced the massive rejuvenation of Torah, are the reasons for celebrating on Lag BaOmer. On this day, we commemorate renewal. Our celebration is not that they stopped dying. Our celebration is that Rabbi Akiva dusted himself off and pushed forward. We celebrate the determination. We cheer the cessation of the plague. We foresee the bright future, bright with hope and determination. As the centuries pass, and as the Romans of every period seek our destruction and annihilation, so we feel that now, we look to Rabbi Akiva, and will soon see about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai for inspiration. We note how they looked the enemy in the face and persevered, thus ensuring that our nation and our Torah are alive and flourishing to this very day. In the wake of a tragedy that would have felled lesser people, Rabbi Akiva strengthened himself and set about ensuring that the chain remains unbroken. That is our celebration. Yes, Esther.
This might sound very smart alecky, but it's not meant to be that way. So he had 5.
I would never take anything that you say as meaning to be smart alecky, but only as a want to learn.
Okay, so it says he has 5 new students. Shouldn't it be 5 pairs of students?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because you had.
That's a great question.
Because where are the Habrutans?
That's a great question. That is a great question.
That's why she worked in the Superior Court.
That's it. She asks superior questions. Yes.
Not being inferior.
Yes. That's a great question. Because why did we describe? It's a great question. Why do we describe it as 12,000 pairs and not as these 5? Right? It would seem that they probably each had their chavrutas or their talmidim, but they were not learning. I would venture to say they were not learning alone, but these were the 5. Yeah, those who were outstanding. Yeah, that's what I would say. That's a very interesting question.
And Rabbi,
Yes.
once again, I will ask if Rabbi Akiva was so in charge of everything and had all 49 levels, because he survived, how come he didn't tune in to the original 24,000 and say, hey guys, you need a change. You need to work on this midot,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the Tsar
Yeah.
Ayin.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
that's a very good question, and I would say that being that we have a general concept, a wide-ranging teaching that if one is able to correct others and doesn't, then one is held to a certain degree responsible for the misdeeds of those others. So by the fact that we're not holding Rabbi Akiva responsible, it would seem to me, Janet, it's a very good question. It would seem to me that Rabbi Akiva did all that he could do, but nevertheless, they were not properly receptive to that. Right? That's what it seems to me.
then it
That's what
has
it
the
seems to me.
thing of not respect for Rabbeinu, for teachers.
I'm
Because
sorry?
then it also may have the additional aspect of no respect for your teacher, since he was their teacher.
Yeah, yeah. We don't take them down for that, right? So it would seem that that was not the issue, right? But they, I would imagine they respected Rabbi Akiva greatly, but they did not work on themselves hard enough to get to the point where they needed to get to. But Rabbi Akiva was not remiss, because we don't hold back criticism when criticism is deserved. And it's not given out over here. And therefore it would seem that he was not remiss. Okay. Now, there's another aspect. You've probably seen a lot of this in the news. Another major component aspect of Lag BaOmer is connected to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. You've seen in the news that they're closing off Meron. That's the city where he is buried. Typically, there are tremendous celebrations there. A number of years ago, there's a tremendous tragedy over there when it was over uh, too crowded. I went there when I lived in Israel. I went there one year. It's an amazing experience. You buy a bus ticket, but not for a particular bus time. You just buy a round trip ticket. And then outside of the bus station, in a different area, there are buses that just fill up and it goes. The next one fills up and it goes all night. The buses are going up there with people, filled with people, and over there on the way back, you have your return ticket. The buses fill up and you come back. I probably left to go there about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. Got there, and you have the building, and where the kever, where the actual grave site is over there, with a big stone there, and you're sort of you get moved with the crowd to there and past there, and it's almost like you could pick up your legs and it's not a problem. That's how compressed everybody was. It was, and you have a few moments by the kever, and then you just get moved along. Went there. I think we davened Vasikin, we davened Sunrise Minyan, and then we caught the bus ride back. And it's on Lag BaOmer that is deeply connected to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was one of these 5 Talmidim. But there seems to be a particular connection to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai more than the others. And we'll see source number 5, which is the Zohar. Oto Yom Bikesh Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai listalek min ha'olam. On the day that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was to take leave from this world, v'haya misader dvarav, and he was organizing his teachings, his words. Nidkansu chaverim lebeito, his colleagues, his friends came into the room. V'hu omer lahem, and he said to them, Ata she'et ratzon hi, or shat ratzon hi. Now is a time of ratzon. Now is a time of favor. Milim kedoshot, holy words. Shelo giliti arata, which I have not revealed to you until now. Ritzoni legalotan. Now I will be revealing them to you. Kol ha'oyoma, that entire day, lo ifsik esha min beita. There was a fire that was there in his house surrounding him. Lo aviman demate legabe. And no one was able to approach, to come too close to him. Lo yachilu dinahora va'asha have besucharnei. Right? Because that was around him. The esha havi lahit kamei. And then the fire was around him, dancing around him. Shamu kala. And then they heard this heavenly voice saying, Ulu va'atu vidkanshu lihilula de Rabbi Shimon. Come and gather every year for the hilula of Rabbi Shimon. Okay? He died on Lag BaOmer. The custom of the bonfires is that represents the hidden aspects of the Torah which were revealed. Okay, and I wrote here, while this theme Lag BaOmer seems on the surface to be unrelated to the first, it is noteworthy that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was one of the 5 students after the initial 24,000 died. Thus, celebrating his contribution to the Torah also amounts to celebrating the continuation of Rabbi Akiva's legacy after the devastating plague. So we also have this aspect of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's death, which, and followed very much in the Sephardic tradition, is a hilula, right? It is a time of celebration, of a celebration of life, celebration of accomplishments, celebration of teaching. And it's been said, we celebrate when a child is born, and we mourn when a person dies. Yet when a child is born, we have no idea what direction the child is going to go in. Right? I'm sure the family celebrated when little Adolf was born. And look at the horrors that he brought to the world. So we celebrate the beginning, we don't know which direction are we going. At the end of life, when a person has successfully navigated the long winding road of life with all of its hurdles and challenges and struggles and successes and failures, when a person has successfully navigated that, and their time, their mission here on this earth has come to an end, to a successful culmination, so that is Hilula. Certainly when it is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. and that is why we'll soon see there was some different opinions of how Meron should look on this Lag BaOmer as we go forward. The source number 6, the Kaf HaChaim, Rav Chaim Vital, who was the main disciple of the great Kabbalist Arizal, wrote that the reason for the rejoicing is for the students of Akiva added afterwards, who did not die like those first 24,000. I wrote this to teach, he says, that there is a basis to the custom mentioned above to go to Meron and celebrate on Lag BaOmer, particularly because Rabbi Yochai was one of the 5 great students of Rabbi Akiva, and therefore his time of happiness is Lag BaOmer. I mentioned that this year, Meron is a closed area. Hezbollah, they should be defeated decisively and quickly, right, have been targeting the many cities up north, and Meron being one of them. The Arizal writes as follows: B'yamei Maran, during the days of our master, that's Rav Yosef Karo, who was the author of Shulchan Aruch, of the Code of Jewish Law. They agreed that the Jews would not make a big celebration on Lag BaOmer at the grave of Shimon Bar Yochai. It seemed to our master and his Beit Din, to Rav Yosef Karo, the Mechaber, Maran, it was degrading. People go there, people are camping out, they're doing major barbecues, they're eating, they're dancing there. Hardly the environment that one would expect to have at the kever of a great tzaddik on his yard side. Yeah, go there, learn some Zohar, right? But the bands and this, it didn't seem. It seemed to be above and beyond. The decision was written that he was going to issue this ruling. He and his Beit Din were going to issue this ruling. It was written but not signed. And the Arizal says that night, our master dreamed, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Mechaber, dreamed about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who said to him that a great plague would befall the people as a result of this decision. It was his wish that they celebrate on the anniversary of his death. The following day, he tore up that decision. Now, it's interesting. The Chasam Sofer writes that when we left Egypt, the man lasted for a certain period of time, right? And it was on the 33rd day after Egypt, when the provisions ran out, that's when the man began to fall. So Lag BaOmer, another aspect, is that's where the man began to fall. Now, Rosh Yochai spoke truthfully but harshly about the Roman oppressors and had to go into hiding, he and his son. And there they were sustained miraculously by a stream of water and a carob tree, right? And it was a man-like existence, right? And this was, the man began to fall on the same date that, of course, generations later was his yahrzeit, was his passing. Yeah, just as we were sustained by that man, so too he was sustained in the cave over there. And and that is why he was on this level, that the Jewish mysticism, that flowed through him. The Bar Tanura wrote, source number 8, on the 18th of Iyar, anniversary of the death of Shimon Bar Yochai, people came from all around and come and light big bonfires. In addition, they light many candles because many barren women were remembered, became pregnant. Many sick people were cured on account of the gifts they pledged to bring to the grave of Rosh Bar Yochai and to then distribute that to the poor. I mentioned before that it seems a little bit strange that we have 33 days of mourning for these Talmidim, these students, and we have 3 weeks, 21 days for the destruction of both the first and second temple. And there are those that explain that we are mourning something more, but it is represented by the death of these students. This was soon after the destruction of the second temple by the Romans. And there was a Jewish warrior by the name of Bar Kokhba. Rabbi Akiva thought he was the Mashiach, or thought he had the ability to become the Mashiach. Once he died in battle, it was clear that he was not. But there was the potential of this Mashiach, the Messianic times, arriving already then. And it would have been with the physical army strength of Bar Kokhba and his men, and the spiritual army strength of Rabbi Akiva and his Talmidim. Their death represented that they were not worthy, and we were not worthy of the Messianic times coming at that point. And that then set the stage for the continuation of this long, arduous exile that we're in, and the many horrors that it has presented to us. And therefore, like I said, it's representative of what could have been and that hope that was lost, that we did not get there. Lastly, number 9, Rav Aaron Kotler points out the tremendous potential of the individual. Kedai gam litbonein mi'idach gisa. It's also worthwhile to view it from the other angle. How great was the merit of the rabbis from the south who reestablished the Torah. The Torah should have been passed on through the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, and instead was passed on through these 5 students. Imagine taking 24,000 streams and then having them converge into just 5 portals. Wow. Those who toil in Torah in our generation have a similar reward. As we said before, the world was desolate until they came along. Without them, the world would be desolate. And through these few individual remnants of the Holocaust, whom God calls, what's the Hebrew? Ha'oskim b'Torah, ein ha'Torah mishtakachat me Yisroel. The Torah is not forgotten from the Jewish people. Once again, keeping in mind the idea of Rav Aaron Kotler, the author of this paragraph, of trying to rebuild Torah on what was then the barren landscape of the United States after the destruction of European Jewry. But there's another aspect, another way of looking at it. And that's something that I had the privilege of hearing from a great, great speaker, a great mashkiach of Yaakov Galinsky, Zatzal, when I was studying in Ner Yisroel. And he came and he spoke to the whole yeshiva in Yiddish, which I did not understand. The first time the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Ruderman Zatzal, gave a shmooze in Yiddish, I figured, oh, I'll be able to follow. And then it was all about being orangutung in learning, involved in learning. And I asked someone afterwards, why was he talking about orangutans? And they said, Ciner, I think next time you better sit next to someone who's translating. Don't try to do it on your own. I learned my lesson. So Rav Galinsky, he spoke in Yiddish, but he also then spoke in Hebrew. Ner Yisroel was incredible. This is around the time of the Iranian Revolution, when many Jewish families were sending their teenage boys out of Iran, not knowing what the future held. And Rav Neuberger Zatzal, he was the person who was running the finances of Ner Yisrael. He took in all of these Iranian boys. And there was there must have been 20, 30 of them, if not more, in the yeshiva. And really, really took care of all these boys. And many of them have become the rabbanim and the leaders of the different Persian Jewish communities in the United States. Right, Rav Davidi, who is on the RCC and involved over there in many of the part of the things that they do. So we were together in Ner Yisrael and many others also. So he came and he spoke in Yiddish, but then he spoke in Hebrew for the Iranian boys and for the Americans who didn't speak Yiddish. And he spoke over there about Mesirut Nefesh, about when you're putting in the effort, how it always pays off. Not right away, you don't see it right away, but ultimately it always pays off. And then he said that he once approached the Panovizher Rav, the Rav Kahanaman, who was the founder of the Panovich Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. And he said to him, I could show you that our generation is greater than the generation of Chazal, of the sages. Crazy. How can you say such a thing? So I'll prove it. So the Gemara says 1,000 start to learn Chumash. Out of those 1,000, 100 make it to Mishnah. Out of the 100 who make it to Mishnah, 10 make it to Talmud, to Gemara. And out of those 10, 1 make it to Horah, to answering difficult halachic questions. In our generation, 1,000 start to learn Chumash. A lot more than 100 make it to Mishnah. Of the 100 learn Mishnah, a lot more than 10 make it to Gemara. So we see we're greater than the generation. So what's the explanation? And he gave a mashal, he gave a parable, that they prepared a wedding, a massive wedding. They were expecting 700 guests. And there was this flash snowstorm, blizzard. And no one saw it coming. All the meteorologists, they dropped the ball on that one. And the food is all ready, 700 people, and 65, 70 people schlep their way through the snow and make it to the hall. So the waiters come out of the kitchen with their trays filled with steaming hot food, and they say to the guests, eat, eat, eat. Once it comes out, it can't go back in. Eat, eat, eat. So he explained in the time of Chazal, the sages, 1,000 actually showed up. So therefore the siyata d'shmaya, the heavenly help, was apportioned to those 1,000 people. And once you split it up into 1,000 portions, out of that, 100 make it to from Chumash to Mishnah, another 10%, another 10%. But in our generation, how few people are coming. And therefore the waiters, the angels come with the siyata d'shmaya and they say, eat, eat, eat. Right? And that's why our ratios, our percentages are better. And this is something that I had the merit to really experience. I was not very serious about my learning as I made my way through grade school and high school. And that's an understatement. And then I spent 2 years in yeshiva in Israel. At the end of the 2 years, I went to an Israeli yeshiva. And I was paired as a chavrusa with a guy who had been learning his whole life. And we had a great chavrusa. And I was able to see that you get a certain siyata deshmaya if you really want to do something, and it propels you along. So I would just say the siyata deshmaya, which means Aramaic for siyata, the help of the shemaya, of the heavens, the help from heavens, that was apportioned out for these 24,000 students, was then diverted, siphoned off towards these 5 students. And that is how that's only helped them along the way to becoming the transmitters, Rabbi Akiva, through them to all the Torah Shebaal Peh that we have with us today. So Lag BaOmer is on Saturday night and Sunday. Typically, being that it's on a Sunday, one can get haircuts and shave and trim, etc. on Friday already, because you don't want to be all unkempt going into Shabbos and then looking all tidied up on Sunday, right? So therefore, in this year, the shaving can be done beforehand, and we will be having a bonfire on Sunday here at the shul, not Saturday night, a little late for all of the kids with Shabbos coming out as late as it does. It is a time to focus on what we can do, on moving forward. We're living through difficult times now, but Rabbi Akiva did not give up hope. Rather, he looked to say, how do we move forward? And I think that is the Lag BaOmer spirit that we need to have with us today. Yes, Dov.
I understand that if someone says a bracha, someone should answer Amen if they hear it, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so what I understood, they said, I forget who said this to explain it. When there's a war, first they send in the regular soldiers. Then after, they send in the professional warrior. The person who says the Amen is the professional warrior.
Okay, that's the importance of answering Amen.
Right.
Okay.
And guess who was a warrior? Rabbi Akiva. He was a gladiator.
He was a gladiator?
Look it up. He was a gladiator.
Where am I looking that up?
And he also was a shepherd too.
That I know. Gladiator, I never heard.
Gladiator for the Romans.
That's news to me.
You'll find it. You look up about Rabbi Akiva.
Okay. If it's an explicit
So
Google,
he was a warrior
then
already in his heart.
Okay. All right, we'll call it over here, my friends.
Okay, and also
Yes.
number 9, when you were talking about those who try and continue Torah and
Oh, yes.
in various generations, and especially when you're talking about the people right after World War II, it seemed to, I don't know, just fleetingly, Mr. Gelman passed through my mind.
Yeah.
Because he did day schools.
Yeah. And Mr. Gelman, who survived through the Holocaust, being hidden in a hole in the ground, right? Dedicated his life towards Jewish education and founding Jewish schools. Yeah.
The other one was when you said the angels weren't don't spar with each other, they're all beloved. It even says right in the text, and they give permission to one another.
Yeah. So I thank you, Jen. I think that's, yeah. Yeah, they give permission to one another, right? They're not vying for the prime real estate. For the spotlight.
Do it together.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, my friends. Yashar Koach, we'll call it over here.
And the Gemara